Hello and welcome to the BuzzStream podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I'm joined by Nicole DeLeon, the founder and CEO of North Star Inbound in Austin, Texas. Hello, Nicole. Thanks so much for joining.
Hey everyone, I'm really happy to be here. I think I've been using BuzzStream since it was born, frankly.
Yeah, I guess as an Austinite, you're kind of in the right place.
I know I
Austin's.
have a fun story. One of the original founders of the tool was, I'm kind of dating myself, but was one of my mentors who kind of taught me SEO like a million years ago.
That's
So
so
I
cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
was using it since it was the first tool I got. That and Moz.
yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, too. Was a BuzzStream user, the agency I worked at. So like that was like the main reason I wanted to work at BuzzStream and why I get so pumped to talk about this kind of stuff because I just love the industry. And you reached out to me, I think, on LinkedIn after checking out a couple of my podcasts. Specifically, I think we were talking about the podcast I did with Will Hobson, and we were talking a lot about kind of the differences between US digital PR in the UK. And I've been digging a lot into this, as I'm learning the customer base and how different people view link building. And obviously it's changing dynamically, as we speak with all the Google stuff. But I think you have a really interesting perspective, having been in the industry for so long too, of the US here specifically. Like, I'm curious your takes on kind of the shape and the direction of link building and kind of that overlap between digital PR kind of from a US point of view. So that's really what I want to dig in and talk about today. But before I do, I like to do like a little icebreaker just to kind of get the wheels moving. And so I like to ask some people, what's a cool piece of content you've seen lately? Doesn't have to be something, digital PR specific, but just like something cool, interesting you've seen.
Yeah. So in fact, this morning, it was being shared on our internal Slack. It was an article in the New York Times about film. I guess film, movies, shows, where a large component of the show is contains people from different cultures and how that has evolved for American audiences. So we've gone from really being a culture that didn't really tolerate a lot of foreign elements in what we were viewing to being one that is really receiving not only, foreign film or foreign shows, but where, you've got shows that are multi-continent and have elements that are quite foreign. And people are speaking, you've got native actors speaking natively, and subtitles are really accepted. And a while back, we did a piece for Preply on American subtitle usage, and it's been covered uh, repeatedly by Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and they covered it again in that piece. And that's actually why it came across
Nice.
my desk. But the piece was really cool because it was one of those like scrolly pieces where it's really interactive, and as you read it, the images behind you and around you change, and it's sort of
Yeah.
um, text-based storytelling, but image-based storytelling. So it was a really cool piece of content, as well as, hey, it was another link for our clients. So.
Yeah. Big link. Yeah, I love that. I think they call that scrollytelling is
I
what
love it.
I guess.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
calling
Yeah.
it too, like a scrolly piece.
Yeah. There's like parallax. I remember digging into this because and this is actually another good question I want to ask you. If you've ever seen a brand kind of pull off that type of like scrolly telling parallax piece, as like a digital PR, like content led, like building piece. Have you ever seen that actually work?
For on the brand side.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the issue is that, on the brand side, there's always a less expensive way to pull off the same sort of
Yeah.
Bing.
The effort's not worth
Right.
the juice not worth the
Yeah.
squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love like content and people, share content roundups and like newsletters and online, Twitter, whatever. And usually I feel like a lot of the like top pieces that they share are Wall Street Journal pieces and, New York Times and even like Pudding, which does such
I
cool
love the
stuff.
pudding. Oh my god.
But I do think there's always like that because I'm working on a post right now about like digital PR examples, and I'm trying to do it in a way where I'm like avoiding those, even though I love those pieces. It's like I want to showcase brands because there's not much you can pull out of a New York Times like super interactive piece as a brand. Like you don't have the dev resources, and to your point, it's like, is it ever going to be worth
We've
going
looked
that
really
deep?
hard at the pudding. Like my role in the agency is less on the executing side and more on the like pushing side.
Yeah, yeah,
So I just I go to folks and I'm like, I want you to take this piece or these 5 pieces. I want you to dissect how they did this, figure out how to do this on budget, right? And more than a few times I've been told like, we're not going to be able to do that within the current budget. We'd have to get special buy-in from a client to be able to do something like X, Y, or Z, right? So
yeah. I feel like if you can scale it in some way, like you get them to buy into, we're going to do 6 or 7 pieces in this specific format. You build the format, then you could scale it. But yeah, I'm with you. I remember running into that same thing with Siege.
and the question you get back, like they're excited, but then the question you get back is, how many more links are we going to get out of this, right? And if if you look at the pudding, like they're not doing it for link, you know what I mean?
Right,
So
right,
there's there's not a lot of links you can show there, and they're not really like a brand. Yeah, they're kind of a different use case. You look at content pieces like that on online media like New York Times or whatever. Well, that's not really a fair comparison either. So where do you go to find these case studies to show
right.
a client to get that buy-in of like, is that juice worth the squeeze, as you were talking about? It's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, even like a site like Visual Capitalist, I feel like gets cited a lot for that. And I mean, their whole bread and butter is visual, design, but like I'm feeling, I used to feel super, I was like the infographic #1 fan, like pushing that as like a shareable asset, but I just don't think, and like we lean on, look at Visual Capitalists and they are still getting it done with that type of visual. And um, I just don't feel like it's as strong anymore. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the kind of like
Yeah. I mean,
infographics led
there's
approach.
one um, agency, and I'm not sure if they're yet. I think they're still producing, but like they started kind of a media company, um, Neomom.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so I mean, their visual maps and just anything visual that they did was so amazing. Um, so I feel like, and frequently got just a torrent of links, right? So I think it is possible, right? But the bar is super high. But I think they would probably be better at like answering the question of like, what does it really take? We did a
Right.
couple studies about using AI like MidJourney
Hmm.
that were super successful. So
Hmm.
those were visual. We did one that was inspired by Fractal's old campaign, Perceptions of Perfection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we took MidJourney and we're like, okay, let's see what you think are the most beautiful women from all these different countries around the world, for a
Nice.
brand called Stylesy. And it did really well. And then we also did, we asked MidJourney to imagine a typical house in different states and across different cities of the US. The Austin house was like so on the nose.
That
A lot of people like that we spoke to, we showed them the house for their city. Were like, "Oh my God, this is creepy."
yeah. Oh, that's cool. I gotta check that out. Yeah, we'll put all this stuff in the show notes. I'm gonna have to reach back out, Nicole, and get a laundry list. You're listing off some real cool stuff. Also, this is great. So, as we're talking about like the types of content that works and doesn't work, I do think there may be types of content that works better in, say, the UK versus the US, just by virtue of the fact that like the UK seems to have been doing this for a lot longer than we have. Kind of like this. I don't want to call it content led digital PR, but because they do and probably still kind of lead the like reactive and like kind of
Yeah,
pitch
they're almost
quoting.
content less.
Yeah,
Digital
right.
PR.
Like, yeah. Um, but do you feel, let's start here. So, what do you feel is the biggest difference in the US digital PR scene versus, let's say, just worldwide? Because I don't want to just bucket UK as its own thing because I feel like,
I can't say worldwide. Really? Like that's too big. We've worked with a handful of brands. I should say a couple. Handful is it's really exaggerating, Nicole. Come on. A couple brands that have had global digital PR initiatives, right? So they're trying to get links from more than just English speaking countries, right? So number one, all the English speaking countries, but then beyond. And they have found that there's really no way to do that well, like really well, other than, and at scale, other than to have native agencies um, in each of those countries.
wow, yeah,
Because
just because,
PR
yeah, go
is
ahead.
about, yeah. Meaning, go ahead, but like PR is about understanding the culture. You've got to be really steeped in that culture in order to understand what is going to land and what is going to be just a little off. Um, so much of PR is about being relatable or um, being entertaining. You can easily think that something is relatable, and then um, you know, relatability is about common moments that happen to everybody. Relatability, if you don't understand the culture, can just be boring. Entertainment can be uncouth if you go overboard. So, understanding where that line is and kind of walking it is really something that you almost have to really just be not just native, because that would imply that anybody who kind of grows up inside a culture can like pull off the PR really well. It's actually a really, really difficult skill, even if you are a native, right? So, I think that's why I really like it took me a little. I mean, it took me a little while to understand like why were these brands doing that? Why wouldn't they just let us do all their PR, right? Why not? Um, they were right. They were 100% right.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not as easy as just creating something and then translating it and trying to pitch it to
Oh no.
different, yeah.
Uh-uh.
Even if the study itself is worldwide, like, the countries that have the best beer or something.
I think something like that might work, but if you think about it, what you're doing there is you're probably creating something probably with your culture. It's like biased more towards your culture because you're in it. And then all the other countries that are gonna cover it, if they do, it's it's like, oh
Right.
great, we got some links from X, Y, and Z. And that's fantastic. But that's a little different than saying, like, we have to get X number of links from Spain.
Right.
That's like a totally different problem to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel like with link building and digital PR, I guess let's stick on digital PR. Do you feel like it in your experience, is it kind of universally kind of accepted as a a practice? Like is there just not as much going on outside of the UK and the US? Or is there just as much, but it just, it's highly localized?
Um, I'm not I can't say I'm super familiar with digital PR, like in all these other countries in terms of like how accepted or not accepted. But I will say that, the fewer outlets that you have in a country, the harder it's going to be just in general, or even just in a vertical. Just
Yeah, yeah.
take the group of people that you have to in the outreach market, right? Like take the group of
Right.
people that you have to outreach, and slice and dice them to the people who are going to be potentially relevant to what you've got. And if
Yeah.
you're down to a handful, like that's going to be tough, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like in Argentina, so my family originally is from Argentina, and the big newspaper there is La Nación. And so, like, I don't know what other outlets there are there, but like, say you're in a country where like there's three newspapers and one of them is La Nación, like you better, like, that's tough, right? The US is a huge, huge media market. So that's where we sort of benefit of being able to sort of deliver this bag full of links to people.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into that because like there is so much potential. There's bags and bags of links to be had. But I still feel like right now where we're at with helpful content is out there, helpful content update, like getting rid of these spammy sites, like getting rid of low quality. Obviously, there's some collateral damage where they're taking down some good sites, but I remain optimistic that they will figure it out. AI overviews, we're recording this May 24th, so like a week ago,
Yeah.
they started showing up. So, you know,
Started
they're
providing
gonna,
some very questionable advice to people on
yeah,
certain
yeah,
subjects.
yeah. But they are training, Google's moving towards large language models to train the AI, and like what they're looking for are fresh data, fresh insights, because they need to constantly train this model, right? I mean, that's at least what I think the goal is to get to. So they are, I think, pushing people to create new content, create new research, new angles on data, new stories. So to me, it's like this is the time to be putting all your chips in the digital PR, right? Like, but I feel like it's not there yet in the US. Do you feel that way? Yeah. What's your
Well,
take on
but
that?
by that token, it's totally not there in the UK either, right? Because if you think about it, reactive is sort of the opposite of the notion that you don't have that content on your site page, um, sort of doesn't really help you that much for all the things that you just talked
Yeah,
about,
that's
right?
great point. Yeah.
So if you want the links, it's great. If the only thing that you care about is it's a tactic for getting links, um, fantastic. But if
Right.
you're doing it because you want to elevate your EAT, you want to be seen as helpful, if you potentially are doing it also because there's a thought leadership crossover. We've done pieces where um, it was so, you can't always do this because market research does not get you links. But sometimes you could do a piece that's so closely relevant to what the brand does that it's also interesting to the media. And you can, maybe there's three or four pieces total that you can, you can create out of this. That it's truly thought leadership, right? And it just checks every single box, and it's beautiful when it works that way. Yeah, you need a landing page. Without a landing page, none of that works, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. I do think there's maybe the difference there is it like the US maybe has a stronger focus on SEO and coming at it from an SEO point of view, like the link building and digital PR is an offshoot of SEO, whereas maybe in the UK it was an offshoot of traditional.
Yeah, I think in the UK you've got some incredibly creative people, and they do seem more. to their thought process does seem more to be like traditional PR or product PR. And it's such a valuable and interesting and intriguing way to approach like ideation in particular. But I think what I've heard from prospects and clients is that the landing page feels some brands care more than others, obviously. The lack of a landing page sometimes feels like a little bit of a missing element here in the States. And so probably what's happening is that it's a practice that's so sort of mature in the UK that nobody really expects it in the UK, right? That landing page. We used to, always be speaking to like an SEO manager. And so what you're saying kind of rings true, but like now I'm reflecting and I'm like, yeah, but it's not always, just is it the SEO manager that's expecting a landing page? Who's expecting a landing page? It's it's their higher ups that are actually feeling like, what are we getting for all this?
What are we getting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what are we getting? And they want more than just quote just a link. No matter how great the
Yeah.
links are, they want more than just the link. Like they want something they can feel and touch or whatever. And I
Right.
don't know where like again, maybe it's because of the maturity of the tactic in the UK, and the agencies have just had this conversation over and over and over again. But yeah, I've also just kind of found that at least here, reporters want to dig into the data a little bit more. They want a citation, like the homepage, like, okay, it was in the email and that's kind of enough for me. That like they would rather have a landing page.
Yeah.
This is where I got this data kind of
Right.
thing.
Do you do a lot of pitching in the UK versus US?
Some, yeah, definitely some. Like we definitely got who hasn't gotten the link from the Daily Mail, right? Okay.
Right. So I asked,
But
I, I asked because I'm curious if the pitch process is different. Like to your point about the journalists, that was going to be my next question is like, what do they expect? Do they expect different things? Do they
yeah,
expect the data versus not, within the pitch? That was one thing when I talked to Hannah Smith, that was kind of eye opening. She uh, came at this with the idea that like, when you're pitching journalists, could you write a whole story based off just the pitch that you're sending to them? Which is something I had never done. Like I was always trying to give them, I give them the data, I give them, but I don't think I ever went into it that far. And, she's been really successful. So I'm wondering if other people have done it to that extent in the past.
what do you tell me more about that conversation? What do you mean?
Y-
Like you
Yeah.
write a
So
whole
like,
story off the pitch?
yeah. So, she would go through this practice of like, can I write a news story based off of this pitch I'm giving
Yeah.
this journalist? Like, am
Yep.
I giving enough bullet points, like data points? Is the data in there? But whatever.
Yeah. She's 100% right. Like we actually design our studies that way. Like we go like 3 steps back, I guess. And we're thinking at the ideation process, is this enough for a full feature? Because the journalist that's going to use like one bullet, like great, right? But like we want the journalists that are going to use a bullet. We want the journalists that are going to be able to that are going to write a full feature. We also want to be able to, if we're wrong about that one bullet that's super interesting, we want to be able to pivot a campaign
Right.
like after a week or two to like a
Yeah.
different bullet
Yeah.
or a
Yeah. Yeah.
different
Yeah.
handful of bullets, right? Or like a different, media market that might be more interested or hang our head on a slightly different trend. Want to give ourselves some space, some white space.
Yeah.
And if we like the super, super, super successful campaigns, for us, what we notice is it's not everybody covering one thing. It's a lot of people, chunks of people covering different things. So when we get it right, um, it's because a lot of those or a couple of those different things kind of hit. So she's absolutely right, but I would suggest that people kind of think about that like even earlier in the process, but for sure in their outreach templates, 100%.
Yeah.
Uh, in the conversations I've had with like UK directors, like of digital PR, um, the things that stood out to me about how different some of the differences are. So in the UK, there's only one time zone. So if you just think about it in terms of time zones, I'm not saying that like everybody lives right around the corner from each other, but everybody's in the same time zone. And like PRs go to lunch with journalists. Like they meet them. They're kind of part of the same community. Um, they they're like relationships are based on not like, hey, I know that this person or this agency consistently sends me great content. It's I know I actually know this person, right? Um, like personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's massively a massively different experience, right? So here, um, the relationships are yeah, you have relationships, but you're really only as good as like your last three pitches.
Yeah. Right. Right. If you're not giving them
So
anything to work with. Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. And a great point. Like I used to think that, every PR agent or, content marketing agency, whatever digital PR agency, like you're only as good as the connections that your people doing the outreach have. Right. So like, if you could, why not just hire people that have the best connections, right? And then like there's just your outreach team, but obviously it doesn't work that way, and you're probably going to run into the same people. And um, there's definitely like a size thing when you're comparing the UK versus the US, and I think that just matters so much more when you're getting into the journalists and the types of relationships. And but there's so much to learn from that, like
yeah,
if you could just like sit and study how this works. Because you brought up something really interesting too, and I would wanted you to expand on it a little bit. So, because I've noticed this in the UK, talking to UK digital PRs, is the campaigns are um, much more integrated with the other traditional PR things going on. It might be, around a product launch or around, just brand awareness. And whereas, at least in my experience, a lot of the digital PR is just kind of link building based, let's just get links. And it's not like, hey, like occasionally it'll be like, oh, we're starting a new like service or something, on our site. And, but it's not, we're releasing a new shoe. So like we need to drum up interest or whatever. And then figure out how you can relate it to shoes that a celebrity just wore and the price of that shoe that they wore, whatever. So I love to hear you kind of expand a little bit more on that, like integrated thought process of, integrating digital PR with bigger things rather than just links.
yeah. I love that the UK seems to be able to do that so much more natively than we do here in the US. Um, so yeah, I think maybe that's, a consequence of how you're mentioning that they came over from PR into SEO, and our practice kind of maybe grew out of SEO into PR. Um, but I think that's definitely something that's very interesting to me, and something that I'm looking closely at. But I, I, I'm a student of that right now.
Yeah. I mean, how would you think of that if, you say you take on a new brand, right? And they want to build likes, they want to do digital PR, but they don't really necessarily know what they should be doing. I noticed that a lot in a recent conference we were at. Like we had a lot of agencies and brands just coming to us being like, hey, we know BuzzStream does like digital PR. People are talking about how we should be doing digital PR. Like, what is it? What should I be doing? So like, maybe it'd be helpful to just like walk through how you start a, a relationship with a site. Like, what do you look at? And how you might kind of think of that from like, let's call it like the traditional PR perspective.
So,
Smart.
like, it was, yeah, I mean, it was easier on the SEO side, because like I would just try it on like my sites, right? But like with product PR, she needs an actual product. So I'm like, okay, how are we gonna test this before we offer it?
Well, let's flip it a little bit too. Like, I don't want this to come off as like we're saying like what people should be doing and shouldn't be doing, but like, what are the benefits of having kind of the SEO approach? I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the very beginning, but like, of like a digital PR with like an SEO focus, because a lot of people say that, but I don't think they like a lot of agencies say that, but I don't think they necessarily like really preach that or do it in practice or like really know what it means. So I'd love your take on that aspect of it, looking at it from the other side.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the benefits of digital PR with an SEO focus, really the direction that we've been taking it is um, digital PR with an SEO focus really means data journalism. Like
Okay.
we've really been talking about data journalism with our clients because we think that, um, first of all, in order to get the best coverage, um, you know, you should demand more from your numbers, um, bigger studies, more sound methodologies, um, more impactful insights, stories told in more interesting and dynamic ways. Um, and then trying to get close as you can to, um, you know, what where the brand is, right? Where is that natural intersection between the brand and like the brand industry and the story that you're trying to tell. Um, so that it just makes sense that the brand would be telling that story. So data journalism, brand journalism, data storytelling, or brand storytelling. Um, this is where you develop your EAT. This is where you're seen as helpful. This is where you're getting more than just a link, right? Um, and especially if you are a B2B company, you're sort of earning trust from humans, not just from algorithms. So you've got to the best SEO really thinks of people first, right? Um, so we can sort of get away from like the idea of links as, hey, this is something that algorithm needs and we've got to do it,
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
that, and the other. Like, the best digital PR, the best SEO is like people, if I do this right, I'm going to get covered in a lot of places where actual humans are reading and are being exposed to my brand. It's earned media. Um, Even if there's like, they're out of the market, but they're kind of being exposed to my brand um, and connection kind of to what I do. Uh, Maybe it's like great coverage. If we get it just right, it's New York Times or Wall Street Journal or the Atlantic. Um, and when people come to my blog, it and they land on this piece, it kind of makes sense. Nobody has to bury it. We don't need to put it in a special place
Right.
on
Right.
our blog. We're proud to showcase this. We're proud to repurpose this and maybe put it out on social or send it out in our newsletter. It's some of the best content that we've ever put together, and we're proud of it. So that's kind of the direction that we've been trying to, over the past few years, push our clients to forward. And I think that gels very, very well with where Google has been going
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is continuing to go.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about kind of relevant relevancy with the content you're creating and the ideation. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of telling the story with the data? Because I feel like some of the challenges that come with creating content for yourself or your brand is like getting the data, but say you have proprietary data, um, how do people then decide what stories to tell? Like what's going to resonate? I feel like that's a big challenge for people just starting out with the
Yeah.
DCR.
I think you have to take yourself out of the direct service offering and think about the industry in which you sit, right? So, if you are, so I'll give you some examples from like, Preply. Like a lot of people know that we've done a lot of work with Preply. Um, so they are literally a language learning application, right? So it's peer to peer. Go there, you can get a tutor to help you with whatever language you're trying uh, to, to learn. Um, when we first started working with them, we ran studies that were like super on the nose. Do you regret not, learning a language in high school, or, do you regret forgetting the language that you learned in high school? Nobody was interested in that. Like it was just too on the nose. It felt, it's either too niche or it felt too advertorial. People were not wanting to cover.
Interesting. Yeah.
So when we like went a little more broad and started telling stories about communication, right? Like now we're like broad. It's almost like advertising. What great advertising agencies do, right? Is they try to make the brand, like Nike has absolutely nothing to do with Just Do It. Again, what does
Right.
Just Do It have to do with selling shoes? Nothing.
Right. Right.
But it really lets people sort of identify with that brand, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So communication is culture, communication, right? Language, absolutely all the things that this brand is about. Um, and at the emotional core of what the brand is about. And so once we started really understanding that, like, okay, that's the line. Like, let's make sure that we stay there, and then let's tell stories about that. Well, now all of a sudden there's all kinds of stories we could tell. Like, um, there's one study we did about the beginning and end of emails and how people can be, direct or passive aggressive, or, what people can perceive as being, good or bad in the beginning or the end of how
That's
they
funny.
do their emails. Super relatable, did super well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, you have to be, ideation is probably the most important, most difficult part uh, of digital PR, right? Is that the element of, uh, you have to be very conceptual in your creative thinking, right?
Yeah. And
But
I think
if
too.
you're only going into your internal data to tell those stories, internal data is great because it's proprietary and like seriously, nobody else could do it. You probably might have one or two campaigns that you can get out of that. If you're trying to spin a whole bunch of campaigns, you're going to have to figure out how to like come up with other ideas, and then figure out how to get that data. Like what's one, where's the story? And two, how am I going to get the data to best tell that story in a methodologically sound way?
Well, let's talk about that. So what are some other sources that people can go to that you think actually make sense?
Um, I'm probably not the best person on the team to talk about this, but like we've looked to Yelp, we've looked to Reddit, we've looked to Google Business Reviews,
So like finding
LinkedIn.
external data sets from
Yeah.
and like scraping them, like get access to their API. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So do you ever do anything with like survey, one
We still do a
poll
ton of,
or
so yeah, we still do
yeah.
a ton of surveys. Yeah. Lots,
Yeah.
lots of surveys. We tend to ask a lot of questions too. That I think that's a huge um difference. I think a lot of people will ask like a handful of questions and we'll ask like 20.
And is that just to get as many angles as possible, or just to kind of make the data richer? Both.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you'll ideate a campaign, run a survey with like 20 questions or something, and then once you get the results, then you kind of start to piece together, okay, like this is a outreach market, this is a potential angle for this outreach market. That's kind of the way you do it. Yeah.
It's still like one consolidated. With a survey, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get at the emotional core of the story. You try to make sure that you definitely get that. And that usually takes more than a handful of questions. You have to think about it the way that a reporter, you got a picture in your mind, like the perfect survey respondent, like one person, and then think about yourself as like, an interview on 60 Minutes where, you're really digging and asking all those follow-up questions.
Yeah, the
Um,
follow-up question. So it's like this is the central theme, but then like the follow-up questions are gonna kind of support that theme and get into the emotional ties and the interesting angles and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
only
like.
reason that a survey is interesting is because of all the subjective data, right?
Mm.
Objective data you can get anywhere else. So, if you're not getting all the touchy-feely emotional stuff, so it's very expensive. So if you don't need the emotional stuff, go get it somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I want to hit on one more thing before we leave, and it's something that you mentioned kind of early on. We're talking about the ideation process and talking about when you're writing your pitch and like thinking about the pitch. You were saying kind of let's start earlier than that. We talked a little bit about outreach markets and like slicing and dicing the outreach market. I'm curious how you think about outreach markets. I mean, even that term, like, some people, I don't know if they even necessarily think of it that way. We have a lot of customers that use uh, media databases, right? And some of them will just say, hey, this angle is about travel. So I'm just going to find every travel journalist I can and blast this out to them. So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of narrow in, focus on outreach markets, how you find the correct prospects for your pieces, or at least identify that there is a market when you're at the early on stage.
Yeah. I mean, for us at this point, that's a little bit like we've already got a lot of our markets sort of outlined, right? So we have our own spreadsheets, and we also use Cision. That's our database that we tend to use, and we've got a whole bunch of contacts tagged within Cision for some of the bigger markets. We've got our own spreadsheets. We've got BuzzStream. So we're not starting from zero, right?
Yeah.
So the spreadsheets tend to be, we'll go into a publication, we'll try to figure out who is talking about, or we'll go to Google News, and we'll try to figure out who's talking about some very niche thing. Like, I want to know everybody that's really talking about Elon Musk in the past, like 3 months. Um, those types of lists are like potentially net new, right? But then separate from that, like, anybody who's really talking about Twitter, depending on the study, right? Anybody who's covering Twitter is probably going to have a high overlap with
Right.
uh, potentially the story that we're telling. So we'll pull all those people in. Um, uh, Potentially as well, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know if that sort of answers the question. Sometimes it can be really niche, and sometimes it can be pretty broad. If
Yeah.
it's like a geographic study, where it's like the best cities for X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
um, that's a pretty general outreach to like the localized aspect.
Hmm.
That's almost anybody one can can be the, this may not be like desk sometimes answers, desk at blank sometimes answers. And that what, like, so we have, in our, media relations department, we have, people who were that desk. It's the assignment desk. A few years ago, before we started hiring like actual reporters from local news stations, um, we always had heard, and our practice generally was to reach out only to people and not necessarily to the desk. But like we've since learned, like desk at whatever news station or the news desk, that's the assignment editor. That's the person who like controls that routes the best stories to whoever they're supposed to go. So, um, yeah, that can be a very the local list. It can sometimes be a pretty general list. It looks like some people and a lot of role based uh emails. But apparently that's okay. Like we have it on good authority that that is okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when you're talking about, especially like local, do you even, if you're pulling a list like from Cision or something, do you go through and kind of make sure that those people are still active? I mean, that's some of the pushback that we've gotten from media databases, right? It's like they're not up to date.
Yeah, I know. And for that, that's the reason we don't just use the database. We have a process that right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. We go through and enrich and like check that
Yeah,
those emails are still good.
yeah, interesting. Well, Nicole, this has been so insightful and eye opening with regards to a lot of different points here.
I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we really did. I mean, I think we started with the idea of covering kind of the differences between UK and US, but I think we went to some really great places here. I want to
Content
make sure I
caffeine.
give some time to talk about, Nicole, you have a newsletter that you do, and I wrote down the name.
Which the only reason you forgot is because it is literally the best newsletter, except for the BuzzStream newsletter.
Maybe it's because haven't had my caffeine yet. I think that could be it. My content caffeine. Content caffeine. Definitely check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes. Nicole does a great job kind of rounding up news and kind of what's going on in industry and in the the context of content. Nicole is also very active on LinkedIn. Like I said in the beginning, like that's where I think I first interacted with Nicole. She reached out to me. So definitely check her out. She posts a lot of great stuff on there. Anything else, Nicole? Did I miss anything?
I do have to go, but like we never talked about syndicated versus unsyndicated, which is I think something that you and it was one of our first conversations, right? Like syndicated versus non-syndicated
Yeah.
links, and like
Wow.
syndicated links are awful.
Is that the short, the TLDR of it?
Yeah, I know. You were saying like that they were absolutely terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Is there like a study out there? I don't think Google is smart enough to be correct every single time. So from an SEO standpoint, I think a few of those get by, right? And they falsely cross Google, right? Google's like the dumb bot.
Yeah. I mean, I think my thesis was around like the syndicated content, like even if you're canonicalizing it correctly to the original, sometimes the syndicated content.
Oh, that 100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the syndicated content I don't like, but like
Yeah.
the value of a syndicated link, I don't want people to devalue it to zero because number one, like so if you are Forbes, it has no value to you. If you are anybody else, if you're devaluating syndicated links um to zero, then that means that the only value that you are attributing to digital PR is a link. And that really isn't how you should be thinking about PR or digital PR, right? It's links plus, in my opinion. So, um,
plus the like the direct
The
traffic.
brand
So like the
exposure. Yeah, yeah,
brand
yeah, yeah,
exposure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a huge benefit. And I know a lot of people think about it that way too. And I think, yeah, again, like mine was from the, the SEO point of view, but you're right. Like I haven't seen any studies that have necessarily shown one way or the other. I have only seen what Google has said, which we all know, who knows if you can trust what they say and what they do.
So like if I were to write an equation, I would say syndicated is like 0.02% from an SEO standpoint. But like,
Yeah. Yeah.
your equation should be like SEO, and that's part of the SEO equation. I'm like all math geeking out. And then it should be like plus brand, plus, awareness, plus
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I know. I think you're totally right. Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
that's
I
it.
think you're
That's all
totally
I
right.
had.
Um, well, maybe to be continued. Maybe this can be, yeah, maybe this can be a second episode.
Anyway,
Well,
this was fun. You're right. You're a very good host. I had no reason
oh,
to
thank
think
you.
this.
Oh, well, yeah, appreciate the kind words. And you can check out Nicole, northstarinbound.com. Thanks again,
All
Nicole.
right.
We
Thanks,
really
everyone.
appreciate having you on.